Hey everyone, I'm Mitch. I'm one of the pastors here, and you're checking out episode 1 of our series called My Money. Let's go.
A few months ago, I decided to ask a group of people at Suncrest, some of our staff team and some attenders, to help me get better at teaching. Now, this is a craft that I do all the time, been doing it for 25 years, hope to do it for another 15 or so. But I always think man, you got to pay attention and constantly keep trying to get better at whatever you're good. And whether you're trying to move from, scale of 1 to 10, trying to move from a 3 to a 5, or you're trying to move from a 7 to an 8, you got to get better. So I was asking them to be very critical with me about my teaching and how it comes across and how people experience it, those sorts of things. And they were actually very kind to me. But there was one image that stood out that they gave me that I thought, that really landed with me. So here's what they said. They said, Greg, sometimes when you're teaching, you come across like a father-in-law. A father-in-law. I'm like, okay, explain that one. Because I'm not old enough to be a father-in-law, just so everybody knows. I'm a young man. My kids are not old enough to be married. I got a 3-year-old, for heaven's sake. Father-in-law is not the season of life I'm in. And secondly, though I know father-in-law doesn't necessarily have fantastic connotations, I have a great father-in-law. Maybe the best in the world. I mean, Larry is fantastic, has always been fantastic, especially since my dad died. He's played a role in my life that's very meaningful to me. So you tell me I'm like a father-in-law, I think, you mean I'm awesome. You mean I'm awesome. But I don't think they meant that. So I asked them to explain it a little bit, and here's what they said. I'll just try this out on you. Agree or disagree. Don't tell me what you think. They said, Greg, this is like a father-in-law. Like a father-in-law, kind of sometimes seems like he has his life together. Maybe even he has his life together a little too much. And maybe he's not really revealing to you the darker spots in his life. And he wants to help. He wants to give you advice. But even when he's trying to help, sometimes it can come across a little judgy. I'm like, so for the last 4 or 5 months, that's what's been in my head as I've been preparing messages for all of you. So this week, we kick off a brand new teaching series that is all about money. It's actually called My Money. And if you're new to Suncrest, you might kind of sense for a moment this seems like a very hard shift. We went from 5 weeks on mental health to doing 3 weeks on money. Where's that come from? But if you're not new to Suncrest, if you've been around a while, you're like, oh no, this totally fits. This totally fits. Because we have a playbook here, and it is not a secret playbook. The idea is we're looking for themes that are real in people's lives. And on every theme, we're trying to do basically 3 things. We're trying to help you in practical ways. Help you navigate that. Actually come along and offer you some tools and some help and some wisdom to help with life. We want to do that. On every single theme, we want to help you see how God sees this issue so that you can have some perspective from above and, more importantly, wisdom from above as we're trying to navigate our own lives. And on every single theme that we do around here, I actually kind of enjoy encouraging you and challenging you to step out in a way that trusts God and tries to change the world. And that you would take on some responsibility yourself to go out there and be an agent, to go and be the church. So whether it's mental health or whether it's money or whether it's parenting or whether it's prayer, it doesn't matter. We're doing the same thing all the time. But I step into this series with a little bit of excitement and a little bit of trepidation. The excitement is easy for me to explain. I do a series of messages on money almost every year. I'm not sure there's a regular series we do where I've seen more change in people's lives. It literally sets people free from the stress of how they have been handling their money. They actually see how God designed things. And then when you do things the way God designed them to do, it does something amazing in your life. And then people start to feel like, and I'm actually changing the world now in the way that I'm handling my money. So excitement, like I love that. It changes you. It changes generations. If you're a dad here, if you're a mom here, like this can change the trajectory for you, your kids, and your grandkids. But the trepidation is, did I mention I can come across as a father-in-law? And with that in the back of my mind, I had some people who were pretty close to me when we were putting the series together say, Greg, I think the approach you should take this time is just to talk about your own life, your own money, your own experience. Kind of put yourself out there as an example. You haven't done everything right. You got good examples, you got bad examples, you got pain points, you got things you have done right, you got good advice. Like, just sometimes it's easier to learn from an example rather than just learn from, lessons. And I was a little hesitant to do that. I am a little hesitant to do it, actually, because I don't mind using myself as an example from time to time, but the last thing in the world I want is for this to be about me. And then it hit me that most of the things I've learned in my life, and this is definitely true about money, most of the things I've learned in my life are represented in this scripture. Follow my example as I follow the example of Christ. I had people who were in my life steps ahead of me, and they said, well, Greg, this is how I do it. I read the scriptures, I kind of sorted them out, and this is how it works then in my life. This is what it means. And I think, man, people did that for me. Maybe I should open myself up to this and be willing to do this for you. So at least for today, I'm not sure about the next 2 weeks yet. I'm going to try to put on display some things that I've experienced in my life. I'm going to try not to come across as better than it actually is. And I'm definitely going to try not to come across as judgy to you, because the only thing I want for you is for you to experience the wisdom and perspective of God, for it to set you free in certain ways financially, and for you to have a part in changing the world in the way that God intended us to do. So, some of your financial lives are nothing like mine. That's okay. Maybe there'll be a few principles that you can pick up. I'm going to go through a pretty long list of various things. My hope, honestly, is that maybe out of all the things I say, 3 or 4 of these things will be good discussions for you and your spouse, you and your boyfriend, you and your dad, you and your sister, you and somebody to say, oh, I should process that. Maybe I'd take that step in my life. And if you know anything about my wife and I, Jenny and I, she's a teacher, I'm a pastor. We get paid fine amounts, nothing wrong with them, but they're not career paths to great wealth. So that's the life that we live. So I've broken it down into a few different ways. So let's think about this just for a second. My money, where am I aiming? And I asked this question intentionally. Where am I aiming? Where do I think you should aim? And the aim is always, always, always into the future. When I was a teenager, I don't know, maybe you guys went through this experience. The class ring salesman came to my school. Now, I worked for my dad. I had money in the bank. My parents were not going to pay for a class ring for me, but I had made money. And the person came and said, hey, who's buying class rings? And I decided that I wanted not just like a class ring, but like the class ring. And you know how this works, right? Like there's the base price, but you can add this thing up. And I mean, this is how it works in real life, right? Why did I want to do that? Well, some of my friends were doing it. I wanted to be like them. I had a girlfriend. She was going to get the ring. I wanted to be impressive to her. I thought, I want to wear a cool ring, not a lame ring, right? So I was thinking about doing this, and I remember my parents came to me and they said, Greg, do you really want to do that? Do you really want to spend this much money on that? And I'm like, these are my parents, right? Like, of course. And so I did. Bought a really expensive ring. And it wasn't a month later when my girlfriend lost my class ring temporarily. I got it back. I have it at home right now. That I thought, that was the dumbest decision I ever made, spending this much money on a class ring. And this is kind of one of my first money memories of regret. Like, I think you did that one wrong, right? And I was talking to my dad about it one night, and I remember thinking, like, I fully expect him to say something like, I told you so. I told you so. But my dad did not say that. He said, Greg, it's just money. It's in the past. You're moving on. Greg, it's just money. It's in the past. You're moving on. And when you think about your money, the only value of thinking about the past is to say, I don't want to make the same mistake again. But here I am today. It's aiming at the future. Do not wallow in the past. That's where we aim. And when I'm aiming, I think about three different things. One is wise counsel. Wise counsel. Now, this is true in any area of your life, right? It's amazing to me when I talk to somebody who's going through a tough time in their marriage, and I say, well, who are you talking to for marriage advice? And the answer inevitably sometimes is like, well, this guy I work with, I've been talking to him. I said, well, tell me about him. He's like, he's been married 4 times. And I'm like, well, don't talk to him about it then. Like, that's a dumb place to get your counsel. You don't want dumb counsel. You don't want foolish counsel. You want wise counsel. And sometimes, people have done this, right? You think, hey, where am I getting my advice? Well, I got this buddy. He tells me how to do this. He's like, you charge up your whole credit card, and then you open a new account, 0% interest, and you laugh. I'm like, don't listen to that. Listen to wise counsel. Maybe one of the smartest, I'm not even sure this was a decision. Maybe I had to. I took a class in college called personal finance. And the idea that I took that when I was 19 years old, it changed my 20s. It just changed my 20s. There were some charts and some bars and some graphs. And it's like, oh, someone taught me. My parents had taught me, but now someone taught me. What does investing look like? What does debt look like? And if you've never had a lesson on that, you have to get wise counsel. Now, I say this as a little bit of a commercial because this Sunday and the following Sunday, we actually have something in Suncrest. It's a 2-hour workshop called Somehow I Manage. And you can come to it. You just have to text somehow to 94,000. That'll get you registered for it. And more than just kind of general advice that I'm giving you this weekend, this is like a workshop where you look at your own finances and you're like, okay, I can get some wise counsel as the first steps to take if I'm feeling some stress in my life. I really hope you'll do that. I'll come back to that at the end. Second thing, new desires. Now, this is not rocket science, but this is the way God designed the world. It's the way the world works. Here's what I know about you. You will do whatever you want to do. People do what they want. It's ingrained in us. You want to do it? You're going to do it. This is not complicated. And so, the way that you change your life in any areas, including finances, is not that you start doing things you don't want to do. The way that you change your life is you decide, I want something else. I change my desire. I'm aiming at something different. These desires, yes, of course I have a desire to have a nicer car. Yes, of course I have a desire to have a nicer house. Yes, of course I have a desire to, eat out of course, those are desires. But there's a bigger desire. And actually, if you really want to learn how to change your life, especially financially, what you'll do is you'll start to say, oh, I do what I want to do. And maybe even more than that, I avoid doing things that make me sick. I avoid doing things I really don't want to do. And one of the things you can think about in your financial life is start to let some things make you sick. Like, I'll just say this about my life. It makes me sick to think that someday, when I'm 70 years old, my children would be burdened with me. That makes me sick. It makes me sick that I would stand before God one day, and after God has provided all these different things in my life, and I have to kind of talk to him about what I've done with what he's given me that's actually his, it makes me sick to think I would stand in that moment and not have a good answer for God. It makes me sick to you get the point. You actually have to change the desires that are inside of you and pay attention. Now, it's now well known around here that I drive a minivan that was made 17 years ago and has nearly 300,000 miles. Do I want to drive that minivan? I don't. I do like the idea that I probably could have spent about $100,000 on vehicles since I bought that minivan, and I haven't. I do like that. I like that a lot. And so it's just a bigger picture that says I changed my desires. In the scriptures, it says this. It says, whoever loves pleasure will become poor. You want something, you're aiming at something, you're driving to something, you want pleasure, it's a path to being poor. You have to have new desires. And maybe even more important than new desires are new decisions. Now, here's the thing about me. I'm good at a few things. Many of you are good at lots of things. I'm not good at lots of things. I'm good at a few things. And I actually have noticed over the course of my life that I have one quality about myself that, this is going to sound arrogant, okay? But it is like my superpower. And my superpower is that as soon as I know better, I do better. I keep the gap very short. Like there's no gap between knowing something and doing something. And I, of course, growing up with this, thought everybody's like this. Of course, this is what happens with people. I mean, you know better, and then you do better. And then I became a pastor. And I'm like, oh, actually not true. Lots of people know the right thing to do, and for whatever reason, don't do it in their life. And if I could let you in on a little secret of closing the gap between knowing what you should do and doing the thing you know you should do, the gap is closed with a decision. That I've learned it, and now I'm going to decide I'm not going to pursue that anymore. I'm not going to go this way. When the scriptures talk about money, one of the things they say is this: each one of you should give what you have decided in your heart. And this decided in your heart is the beautiful picture of closing the knowing doing gap. It's a decision, that's your head, but it's in your heart. And so in your whole will, then you change your direction. And I really want to encourage you to think, oh, we have some decisions to make. And we're going to decide them in our hearts, and then we're just going to go do them. Now, some of you have heard me tell this story before. I told you I love my father-in-law before. This is not the only reason I love him, but he's been really, really helpful to me. Like, he knows how to work on houses. He's an electrician by trade, electrical contractor now, all those sorts of things. We bought a house here in St. John when we were very young. I think I was 24, 25, 26 years old. And it needed a lot of work. And he came like weekend after weekend after weekend. And when we sold the house, like 8 years later, we made like $80,000 on the house. And after that happened, I remember thinking, okay, so some of you will get this too. This is just picture into life, right? Do you remember the age you were, and some of you are not this age yet, where your parents stopped buying dinner every time you go out to dinner? And now it's like, you know what? Maybe I should buy sometimes. Or at least once. Maybe just once. And then, as life goes on and, finances change, like maybe it becomes more often. And I was in the stage of life where I was just enjoying the idea that my father-in-law bought dinner every time we were all out to dinner. And then it hit me, it's like, oh my goodness, this guy, he's given so much wisdom to me. He came and fixed my house. He changed it. I'm $80,000, literally, I'm $80,000 richer because of the work that he's done. And we're going to go out to dinner, and I'm going to make him buy my dinner? Is that the way this is going to work? So I'm like 35 years old. I'm like, no more. I know it. It's time to do it. Knowing, doing gap. I decided in my heart, I will never again go out to dinner with my in-laws and expect them to pay. Never. It's just not going to happen. After all they've done for me, this is even kind of how it is with God. After all he's done for me, you think I'm going to stand here and not return something to, it's crazy to think about. But you only get there. You only get there if you make a decision in your heart. And he doesn't always let me pay, but every single time. Because you decide, you close the gap. You made a different decision. And the power of you and how you handle your money is rooted in what decisions you make. And if you're married, these are decisions you make together. So let me ask a different category of questions. My money. Not just what am I aiming at, but what feelings am I increasing? I'm going to go through this very quickly, but I want you to really think about these feelings and your money, because these are the feelings that I want to constantly be increasing in my life about money. One is just a sense of appreciation for God. It's so easy when it comes to money to think it's mine, 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 mine. I made it, I did it, it's up to me, mine. But the scriptures, which I trust, and I hope you do too, give us a different story. This is just two simple verses. It says in Ecclesiastes, moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and to be happy in their toil, this is a gift from God. Instead of centering everything in myself and my financial life, to be able to step back and appreciate, God, you have given me this gift of whatever I have. And you've given me this lot in life, and you've given me this work to be done. This is a gift from you. For people who have trouble understanding it, I always point back to a verse that shaped my life. This is from Deuteronomy. It says, "But remember the Lord your God, for it's he who gives you the ability to produce wealth." So before I get into any mindset that's poor me about my tough financial situation or arrogant me about my good financial situation, I want you to live with an increasing feeling of just appreciation for God. I also want you to live with an increasing sense of change in the world that you are a part of. With whatever resources you have, you're using some of them for yourself, you're using some of them for your family, you're using some of them to plan for your future, and you are absolutely using some of them to change the world. That you will not take a posture with your money that says, it's all mine. And this is so powerful because this is what the Apostle Paul wrote in Corinthians. He said, since you excel in everything, see also that you excel in this grace of giving. And I want you to be able to walk down the street. I want you to be able to put your kids to bed and tell them the stories of how part of your financial life is committed to changing the world around you. And then there's this third feeling. Well, actually, let me do this real quick because we use this all the time. I'll spend more time on it in a couple weeks. But if you're thinking, how does that work? How do I actually become someone who changes the world with my generosity? This is how we see it progress all the time. Someone becomes a rookie giver. That's the first time they start to give. Then they become a recurring giver. That's just a habit in our life that says, the question on the amount is, well, how much can I afford? I'm going to set it up. I'm going to do it regularly. Then you become a relational giver. And in terms for followers of Jesus, at least, this is orienting your life around a full 10th of your income. You give back to the work of God in the world. It's a beautiful thing. That's not a question of what can I afford. The question for a relational giver is, will I trust God? And then there's radical givers who give far beyond that amount, and they're the people who are changing the world. So, third feeling, a sense of freedom in my life. Now, this is really where I want to go with the rest of our time together. Is if I could give you a gift this weekend, it's that you would be able to step out of here and say, this is the feeling I'm going for inside of me. I'm going for freedom. And I'm going to use freedom contrasted in two different ways. One of the things the scriptures say is that a borrower is a slave to the lender. And of course, the slavery imagery or the servant imagery, sometimes there's handcuff imagery. It's often attached to debt in the scriptures, but it's actually more about a lifestyle. And some of you know, this is the story of life for you, is you don't feel freedom with your money. You feel constricted. You feel like a slave to your money. Money's the master, the decisions you made are the master, and you're stuck. And on that side of things where you feel stress, not freedom, I want to ask you to make some decisions in your life that will move you toward freedom. That's enough on that for now. The scriptures also say, whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. So the stressful part of money isn't only if you don't have enough and you're scraping it together and you owe some people and the credit cards are stacking up. And that's one place of stress. The other place of stress is when you've aimed at wealth, that you thought wealth was the goal. And if you're aimed at wealth, then your mind is constantly running in a stressful, different kind of stress, but a stressful way to say, I have to achieve that, I have to get to that, I have to build that, I have to do that. And I'm telling you that according to the scriptures, at least, you do not want a mindset that is constantly driving toward wealth or hoarding. And you do not want a mindset that is constantly stressed. Listen, life's hard enough. Marriage is hard enough. If you can take the money stress side out of it, oh my goodness. Parenting is hard enough. Mental health is hard enough. Relationships are hard enough. If you could take an area of your life where you actually have some control and say, I'm not going to lay this stress on top of that. It is a freedom, and it is really the gift that I want to give to you. So, to finish up, I want to give you some practices. I asked myself, what are the decisions I've made that have helped me feel free? And I want to ask you to follow my example as I follow Christ. Some of these have scripture verses with them. Some of them don't. I'm just telling you what my experience has been in life so that I could stand here today and say, freedom, that's what I feel. I'm not stressed out about gaining. I'm not stressed out about how little there is. Freedom. So I'm trying to be uber practical here, okay? Number one, live on one income. This is the greatest decision Jenny and I ever made. Because this is a decision about freedom. Now, some of you are like, Greg, this isn't a decision about freedom. If I tried to live on only one income, that would feel like a decision on restriction. And I'm like, well, yeah. Because to live on one income, I mean, this is kind of what you have to embrace, is that you're probably going to live at a lifestyle that is not just one, but two notches below your peers. You won't be able to buy everything they buy. You won't be able to go out as often as they go out. You won't be able to have the house that they have. But you will also look at your peers and say, oh, I think they're stressed. I think they might be a little underwater. I think if something goes wrong, if everything isn't just right, I don't think there's freedom. And this is what I'm saying. More than the freedom to spend, the desire is to say, there's margin in my life. Now, not everybody can do this. But Jenny and I made some very disciplined decisions, especially early on, to say, we'll live on one no matter what it takes. We're not going to borrow money we don't have. And I just got to tell you, here's the beauty of living on one income. It means that when Jenny wanted to stay home with our kids when they were young, she could stay home. And for us, it means when we've had a couple seasons in our lives where there's huge medical bills, it didn't bust us. And it means that we're actually on track and saving for our retirement, and there's no stress about that in our lives. And it means when we sense that God wanted us to become foster parents, money didn't keep us from doing what we sensed God wanted us to do. And it means that when our foster son, who we adopted, decided to go into the Marines and get stationed in California, that we have money to go visit our son in California. And it means that when Suncrest tackles a new project with a building so we can reach more people, that in 1 year we can just say, you know what our commitment to that is? It's just Jenny's salary this year. That's what it is. And this is what's so important. It all comes out of a single decision. A decision that says, yeah, I'll live at a lower lifestyle. I won't experience what everyone else experiences, but man, to have that freedom and margin in your life so that things do not become a crisis. Some of the best advice I can give you. Second, I think you should think yearly cost, not monthly cost. Oh, people love to break things down to monthly cost, right? It's only $50 a month, which is $600 a year. Did you know that? Now, it's not even, you're going to see this progression. It's not monthly cost now. For only $1 a day. Like, break it down as small as they can break it to make it sound as small as it can be. But I'm asking you to say, oh, you should think about this as a yearly cost. I had a friend of mine once, this is early on in our days. This is back before Netflix and all the things, when everyone had cable. And by everyone, I mean everyone except Greg and Jenny. And I had a guy who was kind of busting my chops. He's like, Greg, you love sports. You don't even have ESPN. I'm like, well, I added it up. Here's as I can tell. I got about $5,000 in the bank over the last 5 years that you don't have. And you just have to think, like, what's it cost each year? And then say, is that worth it? Third, automate my priorities. All right, if you're pulling out 2 or 3 or 4 things that you're going to talk about with your spouse on this one, make sure you include this one, because this might be the most important one. To say, oh, what are our priorities? What are the most important things to us in life? This is actually a values conversation far beyond its before it's an automated, mechanism conversation, to say, oh, this is what we value. Maybe you value paying for some of your kids' college. Maybe you don't. It would just be a great conversation. And if you do value that, then you automate it. Maybe you value generosity to God. Maybe you don't. That's not what this message is about. But whatever you value, you say, oh, I'm going to automate it. Because the power of automation is, again, this is back to the decision. It is, I made a decision one time, and I let that decision run. I didn't have to make a decision next month, and then next month, and then next month, whether I was still going to live within my priorities. I made the decision one time, and I set it to run. And so when you think about your financial life, I really want to encourage you, automate it. The scriptures actually say this. They say, on the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money. This is exactly what they're talking about. To say, oh, take the most important things of your life, set that aside first, and then just live on the rest and tell yourself, I'm never going to swipe a credit card that I can't pay off. Next, embrace no for now. So this has been an important conversation for our family, is to say, hey, no for now doesn't mean no forever. It just means no for now. And by saying no for now on all kinds of things that we might have an instinct to spend money on, it does two powerful things in our lives. First, it keeps me from just making impulse purchases that a month later or a week later, I thought, I actually wish I hadn't made that. So no for now actually does mean no forever. It just gave me time to think about it when I didn't even really want to spend the money in the first place. The other is, of course, the delayed gratification. To say that I'm actually building up a muscle in my life that says, I'm not going to be the kind of person that demands I have everything right now. It's very interesting to me that oftentimes I see people of an older generation critique a younger generation, usually under the umbrella of entitlement. And I'm like, you should just look in the mirror. So no for now doesn't mean no forever. This is what the Proverbs say. The plans of the diligent lead to profit, as surely as haste, quick purchases lead to poverty. And then there's this last one. I'd encourage you to buy happiness and sell misery. People ask me all the time, Greg, can money buy happiness? People don't actually ask me all the time. Why did I say that? People talk about this. Can money buy happiness? And I think, actually, you might be surprised by this, but I think it can. I think it can. Money used wisely definitely can lead you to a happier life than money used unwisely that leads to misery. And what do I mean by that? Well, the scriptures are full of examples. They say it's you're happier to give than to receive. But one of the scriptures that I've taught you more recently is a story Jesus told where there's a man who is in a tough situation, and he does some things that seem surprising to you as the reader because it doesn't seem like something Jesus would do. And then this is kind of the punchline of the whole story. Jesus says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it's gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. And you'll probably have to think about this a little bit conceptually. This isn't like, oh, I need a friend. I'm going to go pay somebody $50 to be my friend. This is, you have your money and you have your relationships. You have your money and you have your health. You have your money and you have your intellect. You have your money and you have... And it's so interesting to me, the trades that people make. Do you know I run into people all the time who trade their health for money? Like they just their body's going to pot in order to make money. They're taking on a job that's so stressful. They're only sleeping 3 hours a night. Maybe they're in a trade that's just overwhelming them. Their body is breaking down so they can make money. And I always think, oh, that's a bad trade. Your health is more important than your money. So don't get misery from your money. Get happiness from your money. Your relationships, far more important than your money. If you can use money to buy time, most of the time, it's a good thing to do. You have to look at every category of life and say, would I trade my money? Would I take someone out to dinner? Would I be gracious to them and generous to them and build these relationships? Is that what I'm missing in life to bring me happiness? And buy happiness and sell misery.
I hope that this has been a meaningful experience for you, even online. And I want you to know that every time that we get together, both online and in person, we include a time of communion. This is a moment for people who follow Jesus to look back on life and remember with gratitude all the amazing things that God has done, our need for God right now, and to look forward with hope, knowing that God is with us every step of the way. So now is the time to get some food and drink to represent Jesus' body and his blood that was broken and poured out for each and every one of us. And during that time, we're going to reflect together. If you don't follow Jesus, that's totally okay. I'm glad that you're checking out this video. Go ahead and use this time to reflect on what you've heard so far. And with that, let's focus on the love of Jesus together.
This is the word here in the flesh, living among the meek and lonely. The voice of God is every breath, salvation of the world unfolding. Behold him, lift up your eyes, see the Son of Heaven. Hosanna, Hosanna, pour out your praise, sing the name of Jesus. This is his heart upon the cross, and from his wounds his mercies flowing. And now the dawn put death to death, and ever since that grave's been empty. Behold him, behold This is his home, here in our chest. At every door our Savior's knocking. Oh, let him in, oh, let him out. With every yes, his kingdom's coming. The sound of every saint rejoicing. Oh, Jesus Christ, the hope of glory. Behold him, lift up your eyes, see the Son of heaven. Hosanna, Hosanna, pour out your praise, sing the name of Jesus. Behold him, lift up your eyes, sing the Son of heaven. Hosanna, Hosanna, pour out your praise, sing the name of Jesus. Pour out your praise, sing the name of Jesus.
Music is one of the ways that we creatively express ourselves and express the love of God and our beliefs about Christianity. And I hope it's been a meaningful experience for you. And before you turn off this video, go ahead and hit the like, subscribe, and share button. And I want you to know that this video, this isn't the church. You are. So this week, I hope that you go and make a difference, that you go and be the church.